Information about the world of running, inspiration to fuel passion and excellence, and ideas for making connections and finding community. You're listening to A to Z Running. Hi everyone, welcome to the A to Z Running Podcast, where we help runners thrive. I'm Andi.
And I'm Zach.
Now, this week on the A to Z Running Podcast, we're answering the question, how can we sustain long-term progress? Which is a question on a lot of our minds. What does it take to continue to get better? So for this episode, we brought on, as promised, Nathan Martin. He's an elite marathoner. He's going to come on and tell us about his journey. And we also have a great world of running this week. Things are actually happening. We had a high schooler this week who qualified for the Olympic Trials. Quite amazing stuff.
Quite amazing. And since you don't want to miss when these amazing things happen, you need to go to AtoZrunning.com, click the word follow. You need to go to YouTube and subscribe. And then, of course, if you want to hear us talk less about the crazy things going on in our minds and more about the interesting questions you have, post questions and comments in all the places where it makes sense for you to post questions and comments, because we're likely there and we're likely watching. Now, comments like this question from Laura, and this was specifically related to the nutrition episode we shared recently with guest Megan Featherston. And Laura's asking a follow-up question, very compelling, one that many of you might have been thinking about. So she wrote, I would love to hear, and I should mention, I'm condensing this just a little bit, so ... occasionally. I would love to hear someone elaborate on weighing the benefits of post-run fueling with the benefits of taking advantage of that suppressed hunger phase post-run, specifically for someone who has legitimate healthy weight loss goals. And she went on to say that lovely post-run hunger suppression period is really the last time of day I want to be adding calories when it comes to weight loss progress, even though I recognize the importance of it from a recovery standpoint. So, Laura, that's a legitimate question because we have these two thoughts, right? I want to make progress in running and performance types of goals, and I have weight loss goals. And I know that sometimes these weight loss opportunities are not necessarily the best practice in my running performance goals. And so that's where the tension comes into play. However, you probably don't want to hear Zach Schmo answer your nutrition questions. Instead, you want to hear an expert nutritionist answer your nutrition questions, which is why Megan was willing to chime in once more and address Laura's question directly. So let's hear from Megan.
Hey guys, Megan here, sports dietitian from Featherstone Nutrition. Answering a follow-up question from the podcast that I was on talking to Andi and Zach about nutrition and sports nutrition and runners in particular. So the question that came in was somebody was trying to lose weight, right, while they were running, and they're wondering if they can take advantage of that post-long run appetite suppression to help them with their weight loss, right? So we know in order to lose weight, we have to be at a calorie deficit, right? So we need to be taking in less energy than our body is burning on a daily basis. So her question is, I'm not hungry after my long runs anyways, so is it okay if I just don't eat much and take advantage of that and get, in the hole farther from a caloric deficit in order to help with my weight loss? So, when we really look back at the research, the most successful and healthy way to lose weight is to just skim off the top every single day, right? So if that deficit is too large, especially during that recovery window after a long run, we increase our time for recovery, we increase our risk of injury, and then almost the scariest thing is we actually can screw up our hormones, right? So our hormone production can take a tank when that calorie deficit is too large. So if we can just keep a little deficit every day and have that add up, that's going to be the most safe way, most beneficial, and the most benefit in the long term to not screwing up our metabolism or increase our risk of injury or screwing up our hormones, all that kind of stuff. So lots of info there to say. I think we need to be careful, right, about how much we're eating after that long run, because if we get too much in the hole, right, instead of just skimming off the top, if we have tons of extra energy that we're not consuming, a big mismatch in how much we're expending and how much we're eating in one day, that can really kind of set us up for poor recovery, increased injury risk, screwing up our metabolism in the long run. So let's be careful about that. So if we are trying to somehow take advantage of that, my advice would be have a recovery meal within 90 minutes. So let's make sure we're getting enough carbs, enough protein, enough fluid, some antioxidants in there to really start that recovery process. And then if you're kind of disinterested in food on long run days, use that to really build like a really healthy lunch and a really healthy dinner, because you're probably kind of about food anyways, right? So you don't need to lean into cravings or anything. We can just build some really solid, recovery meals in there versus really focusing on skimping or just not eating. So let's be strategic here, guys. Let's be smart. But awesome question, and I know other people have it, so hopefully that helps with your answers. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Megan. That was awesome. Super appreciate you coming on the podcast once again. So the next thing that I want to talk about is a product that we have. It's the Mobo board. Some of you have seen it, and it relates to our conversation that we've had recently about unstable surfaces. So we talked about pre-working on some of the stability problems that we might encounter when we go into the winter season and we have snow and slush. Now, trail running is helpful for that, but also some ankle and stabilizer strengthening exercises that you can do on this Mobo board. Now, what is a Mobo board, Zach?
Mobo board was designed by Jay DeSherry, so author, expert kinesiologist, among many other things. He's a known authority in the running world on strength and mobility, and he designed it. He actually makes it himself. I don't know exactly what the scope of that means. Maybe he hand carves it in his basement. But it's designed to be a kind of balance board that functions in a couple of different planes of motion with your foot and ankle. And in doing that, it's very simple. It is a few pieces of wood, and you stand on it and rotate your ankle in different ways. And then, of course, you can stand on it while you're doing other things. And if you purchase a Mobo board from Jay DeSherry, he includes recommendations on different kinds of workouts that you can do with it to improve strength and mobility in your ankles.
And you can get 10% off. So thank you to Jay for that discount for A to Z Runner listeners exclusively, and that is A to Z Running 10. So A to Z Running 10 will have the link in our show notes.
Take full advantage of that. And while we're talking about discounts, we should also mention for West Michigan runners and anyone looking to travel to West Michigan in April, because April is much better than January in West Michigan.
That is true. I hope so anyway.
I guess we don't know for sure. Depends on the April. So in the end of April, we have Rivertown Races 5K, 10K half marathon happening, and we have a discount code for you, limit of 100 uses.
So hurry up.
You got to hurry up. And this discount code is going to be shared on the website. We'll post it at different places. It's A2Z_2021, and that will be good for any of the three events, 5K, 10K, half marathon. But as mentioned, quantities are limited. And oh, by the way, prices go up on February 1st. So use it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and there's going to be limited entries as well. So hurry up.
Get on that.
Get on that. So let's get to the world of running. This week in the world of running, like we mentioned, there was a lot going on.
Finally.
Very exciting. The pre-Olympic trials meeting in Addis Ababa, which is in Ethiopia, world bronze medalist Gudaf Segay produced an impressive time of 4:02 at altitude in the 1,500 meter.
At altitude.
Like high altitude, super high in the sky, 7,700 feet about,
Whoa.
which is the fourth highest capital city in the world.
Fun fact.
Fourth
highest capital city in the world.
And third fastest 1,500 meter run at altitude. So she's in league with Faith Kipyegon. She's gone a little bit faster, and Mercy Shranu, which I think is amazing that she is at this caliber, with these women running these fast times.
Of course, naturally, my first question is, how are they defining at altitude? Does it have to be over 6,000 feet? Does it have to be over 1,000? Obviously, it's more than 1,000 feet, but curious.
But, the fourth highest capital city. It was
high. Just saying how high was. Anyways, all right,
absolutely.
Moving on.
Well,
that was really an incredible performance.
It was an incredible performance. Indoor track is back. So we're going to go through this because there was a few great performances that went on, even more that we're not going to get to talk about. But in the collegiate world, Ating Mo ran 2:01. This is a collegiate time. Of course, it was her personal best time, and it was only 0.3 off the collegiate record.
Oh, but also, it's not just that it's collegiate. She's a young collegiate.
Yeah, this is her debut, her college debut.
Wow.
In the indoor race, yeah.
So very nearly a U20 world record, right?
Yeah, the second fastest indoor U20 800-meter performance of all time.
By 0.04
Yes.
seconds.
0.04, just shy of the U20 indoor record.
So being her debut, we can assume she's got a good shot at that record.
Yes.
Unless she turned 20 right after running. I guess I don't know when her birthday is.
So Unthing. You got to remember that name, Unthing.
All right. Justin Braun running fast times on the track as well.
Very exciting. He ran a 500-meter race, which is a really odd distance, but it does put him at the U.S. number 1.
It's actually an even distance, Andy. 500.
Very true. It's the 8th fastest of all time. So,
Okay,
yeah,
good.
now it's the U.S. number 1. And it's Ohio's all-time best performance at the distance. And this wasn't the only one he did on Saturday. So I'm guessing this was on Friday, because on Saturday he ran the 300-meter run, earning him an all-new best time for Ohio in that distance as well.
So those are fast times. But let's jump back to the younger people again for a moment.
The youngins, the U20s.
The highlight of our world of running at this time.
Juliet Whitaker. She ran the 3rd fastest all time for girls 800 meters. This was a time of 2:02 indoors in Virginia.
And she's how many, 17 years old?
She's 17 years old.
Oh, that's right. 17 years old.
So this qualifies her for the U.S. Olympic Trials.
So let's let that settle for a moment. This 17-year-old high schooler runs a U.S. Olympic Trials qualifying 800-meter run indoors.
Yeah. Thrilling. And in addition to that performance, she had another relay performance, a very unique experience gathering the best 800-meter runners in the U.S. in high school for females. The World U20 4x800-meter record went down by the U.S., and that was girls from Wisconsin, Texas, Maryland, Rhode Island. So together, they set a time of 8:37.20 in the 4x8. Now, I did a little math, and that is under 2:10s each.
Very nearly a 2:09 average. That's exceptional.
Yeah.
I'm trying to envision the experience of being, if you were, I can't envision it because I never have been, but if you were basically one of the top high schoolers in the country running these kinds of high performances, and you have this opportunity to run with the other top high schoolers in the country in a world record attempt relay,
that sounds
how
so
cool would that be?
What a way to start 2021.
Seriously.
I bet they're so geeked. But as I mentioned, Juliet Whitaker was part of that race with Moses Brown and Sophia Garinian and Bailey Goggins. Those all were girls. Oh, Rosalind Willis was also there. Did I say that? Okay. Yes. So there were 4 girls that were part of that event, and Juliet Whitaker was one of them. So that was a record that was broken from 1991. So they got that record, stole the record from Jamaica.
30-year-old record. Solid. Now, let's get on to the main topic. Well, it is safe to say that if you're human, chances are you're trying to get better at something. It seems to be a human condition kind of thing. And if you're a runner who is human, chances are, you see where I'm going with this. So that is our topic in this episode. We feel like it is a very fitting topic as we contemplate another year and as we think about the race opportunities that are starting to open up, as we just shared some of those highlights in the world of running. And so in answering the question, how can we sustain long-term progress? It's one of those how do we get better questions. And it's especially important because in running, we don't necessarily just dive in for a little bit and then be done. Runners tend to be kind of a long-term focus vision kind of people. And so how do we do that? It's not easy. It's not easy to do it well at the very least. And in trying to answer the question, we have to take into bring in all of the factors. Like, how do you run well right now? How do you continue running well? What are the things that influence that? And of course, we could talk about this ad nauseum ourselves. And we certainly would like to from time to time, because it's really important in our own work as we think about training ourselves, and as we think about working with our own athletes, just continuing to try to find ways to improve. So we identify areas of weakness. We identify areas of strength and how we got them strong. And then, of course, we look at things like how do we do the training part well, but also how do we do the rest of life well that helps support, that, so that's going well. There's so many things to talk about in there. And so we want you thinking right now about all of those things. We want you thinking about areas that you think might be strong, areas that you think might be weak in supporting your own performance. And while you're thinking about those things, we want you to hear from Nate Martin.
Yes. Nate has been someone I've been wanting to talk to for quite a long time because he has been accomplishing so much significant progress through the years. And we did a ton of research, but we wanted Dante, Nate Martin's coach, to give a little insight and intro to Nate. So here's Dante.
Hello there. My name is Dante Ottolini, and AtoZrunning Podcast has asked me if I'd introduce their special guest this evening. So it's a great honor and privilege for me to introduce to you Nathan Martin. I've had the privilege of knowing Nate as his coach for the last 14 to 15 years. I first was introduced to Nate by his high school coach, Gene Schroll, on a recruiting visit. And Coach Schroll was very significant in his life in high school and felt that a smaller school might be good for him, and had introduced us. And the story began. And so for me, I just think God puts gifts in our lives, and Nate has definitely been one of those gifts. And it's one I did not deserve. Anyway, coached Nate for 5 years, which included a redshirt year at Spring Arbor University. Continued to coach Nate after college for 3-4 years, I think it was, and then passed the baton on to Gavin Smith. And Gavin Smith worked with him for 2 to 3 years. And then Nate coached himself and then came full circle again and began working with Nate again in 2019 until the present. As a coach, I'm a big believer that the how part is actually more important than what we achieve part. So not just what we do, but how we do it. And I think that is what has enabled Nate to be so successful. Some of those attributes on the how part is he's very laid back. He lives fully present in the moment. He's extremely loyal. He's authentic. What you see is what you get. He cares about others and not just himself. He's not flashy. He's not wanting the limelight. He's more focused on the process than the goal. And as a result, he's very humble. And those, along with a lot of other things, is created what I call an overcomer. He has overcome extreme poverty. He's overcome extreme loss. He's overcome lots of different challenges and been able to navigate those in ways that other people would have been chewed up and spit out the other end and not enable them to achieve things. So it's with a great honor that I introduce to you Nathan Martin.
That was great. Thank you so much, Dante. Really appreciate that insight, and also just diving into a little bit more of what Nate looks for as far as his process and how he really dives into that with excellence. So thank you so much for that. I do want to mention that Nate Martin has run 7 top 10 performances for USATF events. Incredible. Absolutely. Super exciting stuff to come as well. You may have heard us speak about Nate Martin a few times, most recently because of the Marathon Project, where he ran 2:11:05. Stinking fast time, earning him the title for the fastest U.S.-born black man ever in the United States. So really exciting stuff, really fast time. Let's dive into our interview with Nate Martin.
So Nathan Martin, welcome to the AtoZrunning Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. And before we give you a chance to say hi to the audience, just grateful for the opportunity. We had you on briefly a year ago, right before the Olympic Trials race, but grateful for the opportunity to get you on for a more substantial time here. We've known you for many years, or at least known about you certainly for many years, and we've crossed paths in small ways, and it's just been an amazing thing to see your career over all of this time. So we're going to get into that in a moment, but as a consequence of being able to observe you from afar, we are so grateful for the chance to really get to sit down here and talk with you. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to be here.
Well, our audience are fans of you, Nate. We have a lot of Michigan listeners who are very in tune with what you're doing. And now, nationally and internationally, people have been hearing your name because of that marathon project event that you smashed. You crushed it. So let's just start there. I think that our audience wants to hear about that race. So can you just take us through what you did, how it went down?
Yeah, so I'll try and keep on like the direct race day and all that kind of stuff. But leading into it, we were just targeting different races, and whether it was getting canceled or we're just having a hard time getting into them. It was 2020 was not looking good just in general, but definitely for the racing scene. So we heard about the marathon project. I forget what time we heard about it, but we officially were able to get in about 10 weeks out. So it turned us into like kind of crunch time, because usually you want your build up phase to be a lot longer than 10 weeks. But we were able to hammer it out, get in good workouts, and we were confident going kind of into the race. So the few days leading up to it, there weren't much that we were doing. We were just trying to make sure we were relaxed, understanding the competition, and kind of figuring out what our goals were. So, which at this point, I'm guessing you guys heard there were two different pace groups. We had a 209 group and a 211:30. So just because my workouts were going super well, we're like, hey, you know what? We're going to just go for it, go with the 209 group, and just see what happens. So that kind of was in my head, kind of even the day of, just saying, hey, you know what? Don't back down to people, see what you can do. And the race went off, and like right away, I was trying to stick with the group or just get with them and just be in contact. And I'm not sure if it was something that kind of went wrong with my watch or what was going on, but my watch beeped and said like 4:55, which is right on 209 pace, but we were still like 30 or 40 meters from the actual mile marker. And so I was like, what the heck? Okay, well, my watch said 4:55. I'm with the group, but then I think their watches were off or something, so they kind of took off. And I'm like, well, at this point, I can either kind of trust my watch that might be off and it's saying like 4:40s now, or I can say kind of skip it and stay with the group. So I feel like I made the best decision. Hindsight's 2020, because they, maybe I could have been faster on the day, but I kind of let the group go, ran my own race, was lucky enough to kind of group up with a few people during it, and then, was able to finish it out with a 2:11.
That is such a difficult moment, especially early in the race like that, when you have to kind of decide, this doesn't seem right. I don't want to get in over my head, because you're fit, you've got a great performance ready, and then you have to kind of make the choice and not, it's the thing where you got to choose and you can't really look back. Still a great day. But, I've seen a couple of times now where you've kind of said to people, I feel like I had that, 210 for sure. You feel like you had that kind of in your legs. So what does that make you feel about now at this point? Are you basically telling yourself, now I got to find the next 209 race because I'm there?
Yeah, so like you said, coming out of that race, it probably was the least tired I felt coming out of any marathon. And that's the kind of things that make me say, you know what, maybe it might have been good to just go for broke and, hope I didn't implode on myself, right? But yeah, going into our next races, we have that in the back of our mind. Ultimately, we're always trying to get faster and better. So even if, I have 209 potential, right now it's, how do we get you better, maybe to, sub 209 potential or 208 potential, and take that into the next race. So yeah, we're always thinking about that stuff, and I'm definitely excited to kind of see what 2021 brings.
Mm-hmm. So what did that race mean to you? I know you're looking forward, but like, what did the race at the Marathon Project mean to you?
So just kind of beforehand, it was just an opportunity to, test myself. Like I said before, on top of just races getting canceled, we were struggling to get into races with the times I had ran. So we were hoping, hey, you know what, if I can just run a semi-decent time, then we can get into some of those bigger races and, use that to do something. We were, hopeful for the marathon project, but we weren't like saying, oh, this race has to have something unbelievable happen. If it's just something okay, we're good with. And then just what happened completely afterwards, because I'm going to be honest, like I finished with a 2:11 and I'm like, snap, I know I could have been faster than that. And I was kind of like a little bit upset, but then, just hearing that, I broke a national record and hearing all those kind of things and just people talking about it, I'm like, oh, wow, I need to step back and realize just what I accomplished, because, it definitely wasn't nothing.
Oh, not at all.
And I mean, think about it.
Awesome.
Globally, not like internationally, globally, but like big perspective here. There are not that many people who have run faster than that in a marathon. Not that many people historically, and that's just incredible. You put yourself in this position where you're asking questions like, "Have I run fast enough to get into races and such?" And now you're in a situation where it's like, everyone would be calling you to say, hey, can you come run our race? And it's a total shift in the nature of how people see what's defined there.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
So I guess that brings us to the journey of how you got to this place and your journey of just getting better and better, even at a high level. Because we told our audience before this, but I mean, you're a NAIA record holder. You have 7 top 10 finishes in USATF road championships. Like, you are very accomplished, but you keep getting better. So let's dive in to that topic. Throughout time and throughout these years, what has kept you in the sport, first of all?
The biggest thing is I hate seeing wasted potential, especially my own. So just knowing that I have more in me and drive myself to see what that is, kind of fuels me. A lot has to do with the fact that I coach as well. And, obviously the biggest way to show somebody how to do it is to do it yourself. So, I enjoy being able to take those experiences and pushing myself and show that to my athletes so they can do the same. So those are kind of the two biggest things that kind of drive me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, to be able to live, so you're talking the walk for others, you're walking the talk for others and yourself. But we talk so often with athletes who, the biggest challenge for so many is that you kind of, the loneliness of the sport, you feel detached. You have to make sacrifices in life. And when you can be, when you can be in the sport with other people and pursuing it together, and in your sense, you're helping other people grow that passion to pursue it with you too. And it's just so much richer.
Yeah, and the biggest thing too is like, even when I'm trying to do all this stuff, because it does get taxing, right? It's super hard to keep yourself motivated sometimes. But on top of just using other people to say, hey, you know what, I can do something with this to make their lives better. And not to say that running is like something that, people have to do or have to focus on. But if there's some aspect of what I can do with it to impact them, then it's something worthwhile to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, love that. So I think what we want to try to do here then is we want to try to kind of navigate this period of time as you've just grown as a runner from the beginning to the end, although we don't have to talk about every moment in between. But what does it look like as you go from kind of like one level to another level and you're making these growths over time? Take us back to as early as you want to, but when did you first feel like you were making a significant improvement in your running career?
So yeah, before I'm going to talk about that, but yeah, so just to start off, my coach did a pretty interesting thing where he kind of went back and went through every single time I hit 5 minutes for any extent of a race. So the first time I did it was in 8th grade. And then I think there were 5 other different times leading up to the marathon where I was able to just progress to make that 5 minutes longer and longer until, eventually I hit it for the 2:11. So yeah, just kind of going back to things, probably the first time I knew I was achieving and doing something big was senior year of high school, where I broke our school record. I went 4:15 for the mile. I was runner-up that year at the state meet, and I'm not a person that kind of dwells on those kind of things, but when I'm doing all this stuff, and you start hearing people saying, "Oh my goodness, you're so fast," and this and that, you're like, "Oh wow, maybe I'm doing something." So I kind of took that into college, which my college coach, who's my current coach right now, Dante Alini, he he was like, "Yeah, you were very impressive in the mile, but I think you have way more potential in the longer distances." And originally, like when you're hearing that, you're like, no, I'm a miler, I'm going to do this. And you have all these like constructs of things you want to accomplish. But, I kind of trusted him, and, he threw me into the 5K. And at first, I started off, decently well at it, but then I progressed far past what I thought I was going to. And as soon as I hit that milestone, which was, I think like senior year, I went 13:52. And he was just like, I think you could go even further. In fact, I think you need to focus on the 10K and the marathon. And that's kind of what we targeted in the for nationals. And that went extremely well. Also was able to not only win the 10K title, I was also able to win the marathon title.
How many days later? Sorry to interrupt you, Nate. I got to interrupt you this time. How many days later between the 10K and the marathon?
It was like a day and a half or something like that. So that was pretty awesome. So I got the title, and then the record as well. And at that point, I'm like, oh my goodness, wow. Cause I'm not gonna lie, like even to that point, I did not like how my coach kept moving me up in distances. Like for the longest time, I even refused to do the 10K just cause I didn't like it. And eventually he's like, you know what, you need to do it for the team. I think you can do well at nationals. And I'm like, fine, I'll do the 10K and the marathon. Obviously it went well. And kind of from there, my coach was like, hey, you know what? If you want to pursue this, I honestly think you have a chance to really be at the top and really achieve something. So again, I trusted him, and I said, you know what, fine, let's go for it. Like right off the back, was able to train for a year, went into the marathon championships in 2014 or 2015. It was some year around there. Did extremely well. I think I ran like 2:15 something. And at that point, that was definitely my max potential. I was not going any faster that day. Obviously there are a lot of ups and downs with training and different things like that. But we kind of muddled through. In fact, there are a few issues where I lost contact with my coach for a couple years and started training myself. And I do not recommend that. It was not a good idea, but I made it through and, kept pushing even through those situations. But along that process, was able to improve my time down to like a 2:14:33, which I ran twice at the exact same marathon. Just 1 year later. But one thing I did notice at that point, because that was that was in between the time I was training myself, was the first time I did it and the second time I did it. It was a night and day difference. The first time I did it, I felt in shape, I felt ready, and I just executed very well. And then the second time I did it, I was like, oh my goodness, I felt so out of shape. Like if I had just gotten any kind of truly good training, I think I could have crushed that time. At that point, I'm like, I need to figure out something. I need to do something different, and reconnected with my coach, and we went back to the fundamentals, and then started exploding with times again, and kind of progressed us up to where we're at now.
What a story! what a season of life, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I got to tell you then, Nate, from the passive observer perspective, so sitting in our living room, as I so often was when I would watch these races and see your results, and I'd look at that and I'd be like, no way, he did it again. Like the first one that really hit me there was the 10K marathon double. And I was like, I can't believe you pulled that off. Not just that you pulled it off, that you won the races, but at such a high caliber. And I'm like, that's just not an easy thing to do. So you come in here and continue these steps along this journey thus far. And the question that's on everyone's mind when they're hearing you describe this is, how do you do that? And certainly, as you described earlier, being able to connect with the sport at a really passionate level, and that always, we talk about this all the time, passion loves company. More than misery, I would say that. Far more than misery. Passion loves company because it just grows and it's fueling each other in quality ways. So that certainly must have been a piece of it throughout. But how do you do it physically? How do you do it mentally? Like what does it take to continue that progress at that high of a level for such a long time thus far?
Yeah, so one, and this, might be similar to all elite athletes in anything, but definitely in my case, I kind of shut off my brain and say, hey, I'm gonna push and I'm gonna give what I have. So in any workout I do, if I have anything left, regardless if my coach is saying no, we have to keep it at this certain pace range. If I have something left, I'm gonna go with my body. I'm gonna push it down, even if it gets to the point where I'm feeling extremely exhausted, and know that maybe I should have held it back, because I want to make sure that in whatever I'm doing, I'm giving my whole heart to it and pushing and trying to achieve my best. And maybe that drive in itself is like a key component that helps fuel people in general. But I think that's one of the key things that just helps keep pushing me through.
So think about, and you can pick one if you are able to on the spot like this. Pick one of the achievements over the course of this time that really stands out to you. And what was different, if anything, or what stood out to you in terms of the preparation that you felt like was a more significant contributing factor? Were there certain things you were doing that were different, or was there something you mentioned, like that period of time where you were coaching yourself versus when you had a coach? So there's clearly some contrast involved there. What else?
So, I mean, you can fall back on like fundamental things. Like you can say, hey, it's good training, or we were very consistent, or we got lucky with the conditions or whatever. Some of my better races, I went into it, I felt really good, and I was ready to push hard, right? Sometimes, you feel good, training goes well, and you push it and it doesn't work out. But I think, just being able to capitalize on those opportunities, definitely in those different moments, is really what kind of things that I push and do. So
It sounds a lot like your tagline, venture on, that you keep venturing on to the next opportunity. Tell us about that phrase. Tell our listeners about that.
Oh man, so the just the origin of that, like I used to watch this show called I think it was like Venture Bros or something like that. I can't remember. But anyways, they would say something like "Go Team Venture." And I don't know, I just kind of love that phrase. And I don't know if they actually said what I said, but I kind of like modeled what I said off of that. So I'd just be like, venture on, just as like a sign off to people. And it just kind of stuck. And it's kind of what I usually always say normally if I'm, signing off or something like that. So
That seems appropriate for this journey that we were talking about. How you said, there's some days that you like show up and you're ready for it, but it's not a great day. But there's some days that you show up for it and it's a great day. So you have to keep venturing on to see these potential opportunities that you have. And you've had quite a few of them in your history. And I'm sure that there's more to come as well.
Yeah. And, also even with that saying too, I like it because it does kind of embody that, right? Like, don't settle for where you're at, keep finding new ways to either improve or find the next journey or the next step for yourself.
So now that you have said that aloud as well in this conversation, we've got to ask the inevitable question: what's the next stop or the next adventure? Where are you thinking right now?
So our focus right now, we're going to go on to the track side of things, ultimately because we think it's going to be good training, but we're also hoping to qualify for the 10K on the track for the trials and just kind of test ourselves there and, take that experience into potentially the next marathon or the next half is the big goal. So
I love how you say us, because you're talking about like you and your coach, and tell us more about how the running community has impacted your life.
Oh my goodness, it's insane just in general. Like I I say this to a lot of people, but I have no idea where I'd be without running. Like if you take running out of the equation, there's a good chance, I probably wouldn't have went to college. I probably wouldn't have left my hometown and, potentially be in maybe a factory somewhere, just, trying to make money. Right. And so I give all the thanks to running, obviously my coach, Christ, and just everyone who's been a part of that. And even just recently, just a running community in general, because there's a lot of different times where we needed help just getting to races or something like that. And the community just came together and got the funds so we could pull it off, which was the case for the marathon project, because I think we needed like $2,000 to make it work. And, the community just completely covered it all. So.
That's awesome.
It's incredible too, because it's one of those things where anyone can be a part of that community. And that's not true of every sport in every sense. But with running especially, you can come into it and say, okay, well, I'm not a 209 marathoner yet, but I want to get to that level, and there's a spot for me. There's a place for me as I'm working toward that kind of a goal. I don't have to be an Olympian yet to still be able to participate highly in the running community. But in the same time, you can have someone talking to us who's a 5-hour marathoner, and I still want to go somewhere in the running community, and I want to be a part of this thing, and they can. And that's what's so amazing, is then kind of like what you're describing, Nate, where these people can be a part of this with you and supporting you, and you're a part of the same thing with them. So like as a coach, you can share your passions, and even just lining up next to a total stranger, and we're sharing this kind of experience together. That's a really powerful thing.
Yeah, and in my opinion, the running community is one of the strongest places to truly find community, right? Because at the end of the day, everybody's just trying to get better, right? There are situations like, some of the races I go to where, there's honestly people flat out, their only focus is beating X person, right? But overall, it's the spirit of how do we get better together, right? And that's definitely what I enjoy about running. Obviously, I like to compete and push myself and test my abilities. But if there's one thing about running, it's that. So.
I have one more very much not exactly on topic question, but you just said something that kind of made me curious about your reaction to this. So we didn't prepare you for this one ahead of time, Nate. There was a study, and we mentioned it briefly on our show a while back. There was a study at a race event where they specifically were trying to identify the benefits of being in this race experience. So I think all of us kind of tend to agree that the race experience is a positive dynamic for the most part. But why is it? And why do people like to participate in it and those kinds of things? And they kind of drew it out into 4 categories. I'm not going to try to explain everything here, but what I want to hear from you, Nate, when I say this is which one of these reasons, or perhaps a combination of them, do you feel like is fueling you in these race experiences? So the first one was just social. Like, people want to be around other people. I like to talk to the other runners. I like to be in the event with them and such. And it's very much a relational kind of dynamic. So that was one category. Another category was, it was kind of like that in terms of social, but it wasn't social relational. It was social experiential. Like, the environment and the atmosphere is what fuels me and passions me. I don't really care to necessarily talk to anyone else who's here, but I like to be there in the thing doing it with other people. So that's social, and then there's the experience. And then there's another one that they broke down that was like competitive, and they looked at it and said, okay, so people are motivated by things like, I want to run faster than I have before, the PR kind of motivation. I want to win the race, and certainly there are, at least, like you said, some people who say that out loud, I want to win this race. But at the very least, there's a competitive nature as to why people feel that the event is beneficial. And then there were a couple of other kind of smaller factors. But in terms of those 3 big ones I mentioned, the relational, the experiential, and the competitive, where do you kind of tend to find yourself with that?
So yeah, just to kind of even rank what you just said, I'd say the second thing you said definitely is number 1 for me, without a doubt. And then like even the last, which is the more competitive. Now I'm getting the ones mixed up, but it was second would be first, third would be second, and then the first one would be third. Is right. Kind of how I rank it with the second one at the top, like by far. So
Yeah, I hear that. It's incredible, isn't it? Like just the fire that happens when you're there with the people doing the thing. And just in case you're curious, that was the number one from the study. That was the number one as well for everyone on average.
Well, that's awesome. Now the overall experience though is definitely awesome. Like it kind of reminds me of like which I don't know if this helps the case or hurt it, but like the mob mentality, you know, when somebody's like a big enough group starts doing something, then everybody does that, you know, kind of without thinking. And that's definitely kind of describes running in a sense, because, you know, once everybody, like even if you're talking about like the race itself, you know, a group goes out at a certain pace and it doesn't matter whether or not you can hang with them or not. You're like, okay, I'm going to go too. And, you know, maybe halfway in the race, you realize it was a mistake, but you instinctively feel like that's what you want to do. So.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm so glad you just said that, because it just brings back so many times. And you've been in these races too, Nate, where someone takes off and you're like, oh, that guy, you know, he's bold, man. He's just going for it. I'm going to go for it too. I'm going with him. And you know, and sometimes it turns out, not always, but sometimes it turns out.
I love that. So, Nate, you're an inspiration to a lot of people that have followed your running career. Who is somebody that you look at? It could be a runner. It doesn't have to be a runner, but someone that motivates you. And I didn't prepare you for this, Nate. I'm sorry about that.
I mean, if I'm being honest, like my athletes motivate me a lot, right? You know, just because they're trying their hardest. I have a couple athletes who are doing an incredible amount to try and get better, and that kind of motivates me to say, hey, you know, I definitely can't be lazy if you know I have an athlete who's doing this kind of stuff.
That's totally cool.
Well,
so
go ahead.
I guess my final thing is like, what would you say to someone who wants to keep progressing?
So there's three things that I think are fundamentally something that people have to understand. You know, I take what I say with a grain of salt, but I think it first starts with belief, right? You know, believing that whatever you're trying to achieve is possible, right? Because if you don't believe it, then it's a moot point. You're not going to try for it. And then the second is action, right? Because, you know, you can have all the belief in the world, but if you do nothing towards that action, it's also irrelevant. And I guess the last thing would just be trust, just to kind of trust in others, because ultimately, you know, where none of us are know everything. So we just have to trust that somebody can help us get to our goals more than just kind of whatever we were doing or just ourselves in general. So
that's awesome.
That's rich advice. I love it.
I imagine you must say that to your athletes as well.
Yeah, I say a lot of sayings to them. They probably have a lot of sayings that I probably be like, you know what, it's not a motivational saying. Don't say that. But you know, at the end of the day, you know, I'm just trying to push them forward. I think the biggest thing I say to them, especially when they're getting tired or starting to complain, is I'm just like, find a way. Just find a way. You know, sometimes they like hearing that. Sometimes it gets them a little grumpy, but one of the biggest things
I like that. Find a way.
That's when you know you have some good.
That's a take action phrase. I really like that.
So Nate, we so appreciate that you've been willing to share. I know that there's been high demands on your time lately, and so we appreciate that you'd come on to our humble podcast experience and just sharing this experience, this journey that you've been on has been, as I've said, such an incredible thing to watch. And I've just been so excited to see it continue to progress. And we are so looking forward to seeing where the next step is. Certainly want to follow you on the track this spring and rooting for you. You know, get there on the get there in the 10K. We'd love to see you in that trials race there this summer.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna try my hardest, and just want to say to you guys, you do an awesome job. I definitely like the duo dynamic. You guys definitely hearing some of the stuff you say is like really funny, and you guys do a great job. So.
Well, thank you, Nate. We will keep our audience updated and the ways to be following you on social media too. So I guess I have my mantra for the year after talking to Nate.
You mean adding it to the list of mantras?
I don't know.
We get so many good mantras from our guests.
Good. I know we do. Find a way. I love that. It's a problem solving day to day while you're running. Find a way and don't give up. I just love that.
I want to tell it to our sons as well. when they come whining and complaining about something.
So true.
Miles, just find a way. I don't know how to open the peanut butter. Just find a way. No, wait. That's not always good advice for a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, because the ways they tend to find are not always the cleanliest ways.
You're diverting.
I'm diverting.
That's a bunny
this
trail.
Is an excellent reflection.
I
though.
love it. Yeah. Find a way. Write it down, everyone.
And I must say, because it is so true, that in reality, very few have or very few do walk the path that Nate has walked. How many years he has sustained this, in a sense, slow progress, just marching one step at a time toward where he is today. And of course, all of us are hoping that it's not over yet. But in the running world, we see these stars. We see these rising stars. We see these early stars and those kinds of things. And it's very rare when someone comes on the scene and you think to yourself, that person has been around for a long time, slowly creeping closer
Getting
and
better
closer.
and better.
It's
Yeah.
just incredible to see. And so mega props to Nate. He's certainly walked a path that few have walked. Now, in summary, so how can we sustain long-term progress? And certainly Nate's 2 comments, venture on and find a way, I think those are very inspirational and exactly the kind of mindset that we need for this kind of long-term progress thing. But also, it's so important for all of us to search ourselves and look at our strengths, look at our weaknesses, and identify where there are areas that are influencing, for better and worse, that progress. And then, in finding our faults, become students of the sport, become students of progress in the sport and what it takes to be excellent, and then execute.
Yeah, and he's taking a step further, execute, and then teach others, talk about it.
That's just a wonderful perk of his character.
Yeah.
Just can't keep it to himself.
Well, make sure that you're following Nate Martin because there's more to come, exciting things he's done, and he's very inspirational. Next week on the podcast, you don't want to miss it, so make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening. We're going to have Alicia Munson on talking about race time, how to be ready to perform. And now she just ran a 10K professional debut.
Oh, Andy, don't give it away.
Oh.
You're going to have to listen next week to find out what Alicia just did and why she is definitely a good guest for the topic of how to be ready to perform and show up on race day.
So be sure to follow us on social media and subscribe to all these places so that you can follow this great content. And like we mentioned before, we want you to join this conversation and follow these athletes that we are introducing on this podcast because there's so many great things to be had when we do it in community. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.